My landlord walked into court smiling with evidence, but one question silenced them. The courthouse steps felt like ice beneath my feet as I watched my landlord Marcus Delacroix stride through the entrance doors, his expensive leather briefcase swinging confidently at his side. That smug bastard was actually humming. At 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that would either save or destroy my life, he was humming like he'd already won. I clutched my own worn messenger bag tighter, feeling the weight of my phone inside, the phone that contained 3 months of recorded conversations that Marcus had no idea existed. Thank God for Pennsylvania's one-party consent laws. Riley Chin. The bailiff's voice cut through my spiral of anxiety. Courtroom 3B, you're up in 15 minutes. 15 minutes until I either walked out of here with my housing intact or joined the ranks of evicted grad students sleeping on library couches. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone to check the audio files one more time. They were all there, Marcus admitting the apartment had issues when I moved in, Marcus laughing about previous tenants' complaints, and the crown jewel, recorded just last week, Marcus telling his maintenance guy Tony exactly how he planned to teach that little troublemaker a lesson. $3,000 in alleged damages. That's what his lawsuit claimed I owed for destruction of property and unauthorized pet damage. The irony would have been hilarious if it weren't threatening to torpedo my entire academic career. I'd been documenting every crack, stain, and broken fixture in that apartment since day one of my lease, precisely because I'd heard the horror stories about Marcus Delacroix properties. The man owned half the graduate housing in University City, and he ran it like a feudal lord. Broken heat in January? Not my problem, wear a sweater. Black mold creeping up the bathroom walls. That's just normal moisture. Cockroaches having block parties in the kitchen. Welcome to city living, princess. But I'd made the fatal mistake of fighting back. Every code violation reported to the city. Every repair request documented in triplicate. Every tenant rights meeting attended with religious fervor. Marcus had watched me turn from quiet graduate student into his personal nightmare, and now he was ready to crush me. Unauthorized pets, I muttered, shaking my head. I was allergic to cats and terrified of dogs. The closest thing to a pet in my apartment was a dying succulent named Steve. Through the courtroom's glass doors, I could see Marcus arranging his evidence on the defendant's table. Glossy photos that supposedly showed my destructive rampage. Invoices for repairs that were mysteriously dated after I'd already reported the problems. A fake pet deposit receipt he probably printed this morning. He caught my eye through the glass and had the audacity to wave, his gold wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. Everything about him screamed money and confidence, from his tailored navy suit to his perfectly styled silver hair. He looked like a man who'd never lost a case against a broke graduate student. But Marcus had made one crucial error in his months-long campaign to destroy me. He'd gotten comfortable. Comfortable enough to speak freely around me, comfortable enough to let his guard down, and comfortable enough to say things he never should have said. My phone buzzed with a text from my advisor, hope court goes well. Remember, the department needs an answer about your funding status by Friday. Friday. For days to either salvage my PhD program or watch 5 years of research crumble along with my academic career. I took a deep breath and pushed open the courtroom doors. It was time to see if David could still take down Goliath. The courtroom smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. As I slid into the plaintiff's chair, I caught Marcus shooting me that same predatory smile he'd worn when he'd served me the eviction notice 3 weeks ago. Judge Patricia Hernandez was already at the bench, reviewing case files with the weary expression of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out 1,000 times before. Case number HC 2024-1847, the clerk announced. Delacroix vs. Chin. Landlord seeking eviction for property damage and lease violations. Marcus practically bounced to his feet. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of a destructive tenant who has caused extensive damage to my property and violated multiple lease terms. I watched him arrange his fabricated evidence like he was curating a museum exhibit. The photos were particularly impressive, close-ups of scratched hardwood floors, damaged walls, and what looked suspiciously like cat scratches on a doorframe. If I didn't know better, I might have believed them myself. Mr. Delacroix, Judge Hernandez said, adjusting her glasses, please present your evidence. Certainly, Your Honor. Marcus lifted the first photo with theatrical flair. As you can see, Ms. Chen has caused approximately $2,400 in flooring damage throughout the unit. These scratches and gouges were not present when she took occupancy in August. My jaw clenched. Those scratches had been there on day one. I had photos timestamped from my move-in inspection. But Marcus wasn't done. Additionally, Your Honor, we have clear evidence of unauthorized pet damage. He brandished another photo showing the scratched doorframe. Ms. Chen's lease explicitly prohibits pets, yet she's been harboring what appears to be a large cat for months. The pet deposit alone would be $600, but given the damage. I don't have any pets, I said quietly. Ms. Chen, Judge Hernandez warned, you'll have your chance to respond. Marcus was building momentum now, confidence oozing from every gesture. The total damages amount to $3,000, Your Honor, not including the 2 months of unpaid rent that will accrue during the eviction process. This tenant has been nothing but problematic since day one, constantly filing frivolous complaints with the city, harassing my maintenance staff, and now this destruction. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. The recording from last Tuesday was burning a hole in my consciousness. Asterisk, Tony, I need you to rough up apartment 4B a little. Nothing too obvious, just enough to make it look like the Chen girl trashed the place. Those scratches from the previous tenant. Perfect. Get some good photos, asterisk. But I forced myself to wait. Let him dig his grave deeper first. Marcus produced a manila folder thick with documents. I have repair invoices, photographs, and testimony from my maintenance supervisor Tony Ricci, who documented the damage immediately after Ms. Chen's complaints to the housing authority. The timeline was beautiful in its stupidity. Marcus was claiming Tony had documented damage in September, damage that I'd reported to the city in July. But he was so focused on his performance that he'd stopped paying attention to details. Judge Hernandez examined the photos with growing skepticism. Mr. Delacroix, some of these images appear to show patterns consistent with long-term damage, not recent destruction. Marcus's smile flickered for just a moment. Your Honor, I can assure you that my property was in pristine condition when Ms. Chen took occupancy. We maintain very high standards. That was rich, coming from a man whose high standards included apartments with no heat, broken windows, and electrical outlets that sparked when you plugged anything in. Ms. Chen, Judge Hernandez turned to me. How do you respond to these allegations? I stood slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was showtime. I cleared my throat and pulled out my own folder, deliberately thinner than Marcus's theatrical display. Your Honor, I'd like to present my evidence in chronological order, starting with my move-in documentation. The first photo I handed up was timestamped August 3, 2024, the day I'd signed my lease. It showed the exact same scratched doorframe Marcus claimed was pet damage. This photograph was taken during my initial walkthrough, before I'd even brought my belongings inside. Marcus's confident posture shifted slightly. I caught him glancing at his lawyer, a tired-looking man who'd probably handled a dozen identical cases this week. Your Honor, I continued, producing more time-stamped photos. Every piece of alleged damage was present when I moved in. I documented everything because I'd heard about Mr. Delacroix's reputation in the graduate housing community. Judge Hernandez studied my photos with growing interest. These timestamps show August 3, but Mr. Delacroix's repair invoices are dated September 15. Can you explain this discrepancy, Mr. Delacroix? Your Honor, Marcus jumped up, his voice tighter now. Timestamps can be manipulated. My maintenance supervisor Tony Ricci personally inspected that unit in July and found no damage whatsoever. That was exactly what I'd been waiting for. Actually, Your Honor, I'd like to address Mr. Ricci's inspection. I pulled out a printed email dated July 22, 2024. This is Mr. Ricci's work order response when I first reported the damaged doorframe and scratched floors. He wrote, and I quote, "Damage noted, appears to be from previous tenant's cat. Will add to repair list when budget allows." The color drained from Marcus's face. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something urgent in his ear, but Marcus waved him off dismissively. Your Honor, that email is taken out of context, Marcus stammered. Tony was referring to different damage. Recent damage. From Ms. Chen's unauthorized pet. Judge Hernandez looked up sharply. Mr. Delacroix, do you have any actual evidence that Ms. Chen has a pet? Veterinary records, witness statements, anything beyond these photographs of pre-existing damage? Marcus glanced at his briefcase like it might spontaneously generate better evidence. Your Honor, the damage speaks for itself. The scratches are clearly from cat claws. From a cat that was documented in your employee's email as belonging to the previous tenant, Judge Hernandez said dryly. I felt the first flutter of hope in my chest, but I couldn't let up now. Marcus was cornered, but wounded slumlords were dangerous. Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice taking on a desperate edge, Ms. Chen has been a problem tenant from day one. She's filed 17 complaints with the Housing Authority, 17. She's harassing my staff, demanding unreasonable accommodations, and clearly trying to avoid paying legitimate damages. What kind of complaints? Judge Hernandez asked me. I opened my second folder. Broken heating system during a January cold snap, electrical outlets that sparked when used, a bathroom ceiling that collapsed due to water damage from the unit above, black mold in the shower, and cockroach infestations that Mr. Delacroix claimed were normal urban living conditions. Each item I listed made Marcus visibly flinch. By the time I finished, he looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Your Honor, his lawyer finally interjected, my client maintains that reasonable wear and tear. Reasonable wear and tear doesn't include collapsed ceilings, Judge Hernandez cut him off. She turned back to Marcus. Mr. Delacroix, it sounds like Ms. Chen was reporting legitimate habitability issues, not making frivolous complaints. Marcus's jaw tightened. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, searching for some way to salvage his case. That's when he made his fatal mistake. Your Honor, this tenant has been nothing but trouble. She records our conversations without permission and threatens to sue over every minor issue. She's vindictive and... He stopped mid-sentence, realizing what he'd just admitted. My hand was already moving toward my phone. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Marcus's face went from confident tan to sickly pale as he realized what had just tumbled out of his mouth. Judge Hernandez's eyebrows shot up so fast I thought they might launch into orbit. Mr. Delacroix, she said slowly, did you just admit that Ms. Chen has been recording your conversations? I could practically hear Marcus's brain scrambling for damage control. Your Honor, I misspoke. What I meant was... Because if she has been recording conversations, Judge Hernandez continued, her voice taking on a dangerous edge, and if those recordings are legal under Pennsylvania's one-party consent law, I'd be very interested to hear them. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. This wasn't how I'd planned to reveal the recordings, but Marcus had just handed me the perfect opening on a silver platter. Actually, Your Honor, I said, standing slowly, I do have recordings. Several of them. Marcus shot to his feet like he'd been electrocuted. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Those recordings were made without my knowledge, and they're completely legal in Pennsylvania, Judge Hernandez cut him off. Ms. Chen, I assume you're prepared to authenticate these recordings? I nodded, pulling out my phone with hands that I hoped weren't visibly shaking. Yes, Your Honor. I have the original files with metadata showing date, time, and location. Marcus's lawyer was frantically scribbling notes and whispering urgent warnings that his client was pointedly ignoring. I almost felt bad for the guy, almost. Your Honor, Marcus tried again, his voice climbing an octave, these recordings are irrelevant to the damage claims. This is just a desperate attempt to. Mr. Delacroix, sit down, Judge Hernandez ordered. Ms. Chen, please proceed. I connected my phone to the courtroom's audio system with the cable I brought specifically for this moment. Your Honor, this first recording is from September 28, 3 days after I filed my most recent habitability complaint with the city. The recording crackled to life, filling the courtroom with Marcus's voice from our hallway conversation outside my apartment. Asterisk, Riley, you need to understand something. I've been in this business for 22 years, and I've dealt with troublemakers before. You keep calling the city, keep making waves, and things are going to get very difficult for you here. Very difficult. Asterisk. My own voice responded, asterisk, are you threatening me, Mr. Delacroix? Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm not threatening anything. I'm just saying that good tenants who don't cause problems tend to have much more pleasant living experiences. Bad tenants, well, they find that city life can be pretty harsh. Asterisk. The recording ended, and the courtroom fell silent again. Marcus looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Your Honor, I said quietly, I made 17 repair requests because my apartment was genuinely uninhabitable. The heating didn't work for 6 weeks in January. I had to sleep in the library because my apartment was literally freezing. Judge Hernandez was taking notes furiously. Mr. Delacroix, would you care to explain this recording? Your Honor, that conversation is taken completely out of context. I was simply trying to explain normal landlord-tenant procedures. It sounds like intimidation to me, Judge Hernandez said flatly. Ms. Chen, do you have additional recordings? I nodded, my confidence growing with each passing second. Marcus was unraveling in real time, his expensive suit suddenly looking too big for his shrinking frame. Your Honor, the next recording is from October 15th, the day before Mr. Delacroix filed this eviction lawsuit. But as I reached for my phone to cue up the nuclear option, the recording of Marcus instructing Tony to fake the damage, the courtroom door burst open. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. We all turned to see a burly man in work clothes standing in the doorway, breathing hard like he'd been running. Tony Ricci had just arrived, and he looked absolutely terrified. The temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees as Tony Ricci stood frozen in the doorway, his work-stained clothes a stark contrast to the formal setting. His weathered face was flushed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the October chill outside. Marcus went rigid in his chair, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the defendant's table. Tony, what are you? Why are you here? Judge Hernandez looked between the three of us with growing interest. Mr. Ricci, I presume. You're mentioned extensively in this case. Please, come forward. Tony shuffled into the courtroom like a man walking to his execution. His eyes darted between Marcus and me, settling finally on the judge with something that looked suspiciously like relief. Your Honor, I need to tell you something. About this case. Tony, Marcus hissed, his voice sharp with warning. You don't need to. Actually, I do. Tony's voice got stronger as he spoke, like he was finding his backbone in real time. I've been losing sleep for 3 weeks over this mess. My heart was hammering. This wasn't in any script I'd imagined. Tony was supposed to be Marcus's loyal soldier, the guy who'd helped fabricate evidence against me. But the man standing in front of Judge Hernandez looked more like someone ready to confess than someone ready to lie under oath. Mr. Ricci, Judge Hernandez said carefully, are you here voluntarily? Yes, ma'am. I drove here myself. Tony glanced at Marcus, whose face had gone from pale to green. I couldn't let this go to trial knowing what I know. Tony, Marcus stood abruptly, his voice cracking with desperation. Think about what you're doing. Think about your job, your family. That's exactly what I am thinking about, Tony shot back, his voice gaining strength. I got 3 kids, Mr. Delacroix. I can't have them grow up knowing their dad helped frame some college girl who never did nothing wrong. Frame. The word hung in the air like smoke. Judge Hernandez set down her pen and gave Tony her full attention. Mr. Ricci, before you continue, I need to advise you that anything you say here is on the record and under oath. Do you understand? Tony nodded firmly. Yes, ma'am. I understand completely. He pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket. Your Honor, I got something that belongs to this case. Photos. Real photos, from when I did the actual inspection of apartment 4B back in July. Marcus made a strangled sound. Tony, you can't. I can and I will, Tony said, his voice steady now. He handed the envelope to the bailiff. Those photos show every piece of damage that was already there when Ms. Chen moved in. Every scratch, every stain, every broken fixture. I documented it all because that's my job. My mind was reeling. Tony had real evidence. Evidence that supported my case. Judge Hernandez examined the photos while the courtroom held its collective breath. When she looked up, her expression was thunderous. Mr. Ricci, these photographs are dated July 18, 2024. They show extensive pre-existing damage to the unit in question. Yet Mr. Delacroix's lawsuit claims this damage was caused by Ms. Chen after she moved in on August 3rd. That's right, Your Honor. Every bit of damage Mr. Delacroix is claiming came from Ms. Chen was already there when she signed her lease. I told him so myself. Tony, Marcus whispered, his voice broken. Please. Think about what you're doing to me. To my family. Tony turned to face his boss, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked Marcus straight in the eye. I am thinking about family, Mr. Delacroix. But I'm thinking about mine, not yours. And I can't teach my kids that lying and cheating is okay just because someone pays your salary. Judge Hernandez was writing furiously. Mr. Ricci, are you prepared to testify that Mr. Delacroix knowingly filed false damage claims? Tony's answer would either save me or damn us both. Yes, ma'am. I sure am. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Tony Ricci stood there, shoulders squared, looking like a man who'd finally decided to do the right thing regardless of the consequences. But Marcus wasn't going down without a fight. Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice taking on a desperate edge, Mr. Ricci is clearly being coerced. Ms. Chen has obviously gotten to him somehow. Nobody got to me, Tony interrupted, his voice sharp. What got to me was my conscience. And this. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I recorded our conversation last Tuesday, Mr. Delacroix. The one where you told me to rough up apartment 4B and make it look like Ms. Chen trashed the place. My jaw dropped. Tony had been recording too. The plot twist I never saw coming was that Marcus's own employee had been documenting his crimes. Marcus went dead white. Tony, you can't, that conversation was private. Just like Ms. Chen's recordings were private. Tony shot back. Funny how that works, isn't it? Judge Hernandez looked between Tony and me with something approaching amazement. Mr. Ricci, are you telling me that you also have audio recordings of Mr. Delacroix? Yes, ma'am. Started recording our conversations 3 months ago when he asked me to lie on inspection reports for another property. I figured I might need protection someday. Tony's voice cracked slightly. I just never thought it would come to this. The betrayal on Marcus's face was almost comical. His loyal soldier hadn't just defected, he'd been gathering intelligence the entire time. Your Honor, Marcus's lawyer finally stood, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the last 10 minutes. I need to request a brief recess to consult with my client. Denied, Judge Hernandez said flatly. We're going to hear these recordings right now. Mr. Ricci, please proceed. Tony connected his phone to the court system with the same cable I'd brought. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus was about to be destroyed by the same technology he'd accused me of using vindicatively. The recording quality was surprisingly clear. Tony's voice came through first, so you want me to document new damage in apartment 4B? But Mr. Delacroix, I already filed my report saying the damage was pre-existing. Then Marcus's voice, dripping with arrogant confidence, Tony, listen to me carefully. That Chin girl is about to cost me thousands in city fines with her constant complaints. I need her gone, and I need her to pay for the privilege. Those scratches from the previous tenant's cat. They're fresh damage from her unauthorized pet. That water stain from the upstairs leak. She caused it somehow. I don't care how you make it work, just make it work. But that's not. That's not what, Tony. Not honest. This is business. Chen wants to play hardball with the housing authority, she gets to learn how expensive that game really is. Document whatever damage you need to document to get me my $3 grand. The recording continued for another 30 seconds, with Marcus getting increasingly explicit about his plans to frame me. By the time it ended, he looked like a deflated balloon. Judge Hernandez set down her pen and fixed Marcus with a stare that could have melted steel. Mr. Delacroix, I've been hearing landlord-tenant cases for 15 years, and this is the most blatant case of perjury and fraud I've ever encountered in my courtroom. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His expensive lawyer had his head in his hands. Your Honor, I said quietly, standing up with my phone still in hand, I have that same conversation recorded from my apartment. Mr. Delacroix was standing right outside my door when he made that call. The final nail in the coffin. Marcus hadn't just confessed to one person, he'd confessed within earshot of his victim, in a one-party consent state, while standing on property where I had every right to be recording. Tony looked at me with something approaching an apology in his eyes. Ms. Chen, I'm sorry it took me so long to do the right thing. I got kids to feed, but that's no excuse for what almost happened here. Judge Hernandez was already reaching for her gavel. But before she could speak, Marcus made one last, desperate play. Your Honor, I want to withdraw the lawsuit. Too late for that, Mr. Delacroix. We're just getting started. Judge Hernandez's gavel stayed suspended in the air as Marcus's desperate words echoed through the courtroom. The silence that followed was deafening. I'm sorry, Mr. Delacroix, she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, but withdrawal is no longer an option. We've heard testimony of deliberate fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. This court has jurisdiction over more than just your eviction case now. Marcus slumped in his chair like a marionette with cut strings. His lawyer was frantically shuffling papers, probably calculating how quickly he could distance himself from this disaster. Furthermore, Judge Hernandez continued, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into all of Mr. Delacroix's current eviction cases. Bailiff, please contact the district attorney's office. They'll want to review these recordings. My heart was soaring, but Tony Ricci wasn't done dropping bombshells. Your Honor, he said, clearing his throat nervously, there's more. Ms. Chen isn't the first tenant Mr. Delacroix has done this to. The courtroom seemed to collectively lean forward. Even Marcus's lawyer looked up from his papers in horror. What do you mean, Mr. Ricci? Judge Hernandez asked. Tony pulled out a battered notebook from his jacket pocket. I keep records of all my work orders. Over the past 2 years, Mr. Delacroix has asked me to falsify damage reports for at least 8 different tenants. All of them were graduate students or young professionals who'd filed complaints with the city. I felt sick. 8 other people had gone through what I was experiencing. 8 other lives potentially ruined because they dared to demand basic habitability. Jesus Christ, Tony, Marcus whispered, his facade completely crumbled now. You kept records. 23 years in maintenance work teaches you to document everything, Tony replied. Especially when your boss starts asking you to break the law. Judge Hernandez was writing furiously. Mr. Ricci, I'm going to need you to provide those records to the court immediately. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Ricci receives protection, this could be a significant whistleblower case. The mention of whistleblower protection made everything suddenly real. This wasn't just about my eviction anymore. Tony had just exposed what sounded like a systematic fraud operation spanning years. Marcus finally found his voice, but it came out as a broken croak. Your Honor, I can explain. Mr. Delacroix, anything you say from this point forward will likely be used against you in criminal proceedings. I strongly suggest you invoke your right to remain silent. Criminal proceedings. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd walked into court this morning expecting to collect $3,000 and rid himself of a troublesome tenant. Instead, he was facing potential federal fraud charges. Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I have one more recording. From this morning, actually. Everyone turned to stare at me. I hadn't planned to reveal this, but the momentum was too strong to stop now. This morning at 7:43 a.m., Mr. Delacroix called me. I believe he was attempting to intimidate me before court. I connected my phone again, my hand surprisingly steady. He didn't know I was recording. Marcus's voice filled the courtroom one final time, Riley, you little bitch, I hope you're ready for today. When I'm done with you, you'll be lucky to rent a cardboard box under a bridge. You think you're so smart with your cameras and your complaints? I'm about to teach you how the real world works. $3,000 is just the beginning, I'll sue you for defamation, harassment, and anything else my lawyer can think of. You'll be paying me for the next 10 years. The recording ended, and Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Judge Hernandez set down her gavel with a sharp crack that made everyone jump. Court is adjourned. Mr. Delacroix, consider yourself served. The gavel's crack still echoed in my ears as I watched two uniformed officers approach Marcus's table. Judge Hernandez hadn't been kidding about criminal proceedings, they were already in motion. Marcus Delacroix, the first officer said, his voice cutting through the courtroom's stunned silence, you're under arrest for perjury, fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Marcus shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled backward. This is insane. You can't arrest me for a civil dispute. Sir, please place your hands behind your back, the second officer said, producing handcuffs that glinted under the fluorescent lights. I watched in stunned disbelief as my slumlord, the man who terrorized me for months, was read his Miranda rights in open court. His expensive suit suddenly looked like a costume he'd borrowed for a role he couldn't play. Your Honor, Marcus's lawyer stammered, my client needs time to arrange bail, to contact his family. Your client should have thought about his family before running a systematic fraud operation, Judge Hernandez replied coldly. She turned to Tony, who was clutching his notebook like a lifeline. Mr. Ricci, Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit will need those records this afternoon. Tony nodded vigorously. Yes, ma'am. I got everything going back to 2022. Names, dates, amounts, all of it. As the officers led Marcus toward the door, he twisted around to stare at me with pure venom. This isn't over, Chin. I've got lawyers, connections. Mr. Delacroix, Judge Hernandez's voice boomed, I strongly advise you to stop talking. Now. The courtroom doors slammed shut behind him, and suddenly the space felt enormous and empty. I stood there, messenger bag clutched in my sweaty hands, trying to process what had just happened. Ms. Chen, Judge Hernandez called, her voice gentler now. Approach the bench, please. I walked forward on unsteady legs, feeling like I was moving through thick water. Tony fell into step beside me, his weathered face creased with worry. First, the judge said quietly, are you safe? Do you have somewhere secure to stay while this investigation proceeds? The question hit me like a cold splash of reality. Marcus was in custody, but he'd mentioned lawyers and connections. Men like him didn't disappear quietly into prison cells, they made bail, they hired expensive defense teams, and they held grudges. I think so, Your Honor. I'm staying in graduate housing on campus. Good. I'm issuing a temporary restraining order against Mr. Delacroix and anyone acting on his behalf. They're not allowed within 500 feet of you or your residence. She scribbled something on official letterhead. Detective Morrison will want to interview you this week. You'll likely be a key witness in the criminal case. Key witness. The words made my stomach lurch. I'd wanted justice, but I hadn't fully considered what that would mean for my life over the next months, or years. Mr. Ricci, Judge Hernandez continued, the district attorney's office will be in touch about witness protection options. Given the scope of what you've revealed, you may be at risk. Tony's face went pale. What kind of risk? The kind that happens when you expose millions of dollars in fraud, she said grimly. Mr. Delacroix owns 47 properties in this city. If he's been running the same scheme on multiple tenants across multiple buildings, we're looking at federal charges with serious prison time. People kill for less. The word kill made my knees go weak. This morning I'd been fighting to save my apartment. Now I was apparently in danger from a landlord who might prefer dead witnesses to prison time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, saw the news. We need to talk. Sarah Kim, Legal Aid Society. News? What news? Judge Hernandez noticed my confusion. Ms. Chen, you should know, there were 3 reporters in the gallery today. 3 reporters. The words hit me like ice water. I spun around to scan the nearly empty courtroom, spotting a woman with a press badge scribbling furiously in a notebook near the back row. Your Honor, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, what kind of news coverage are we talking about? Judge Hernandez's expression was sympathetic but grim. Housing fraud involving graduate students at a major university. Multiple victims across several years. Ms. Chen, this story is going to be everywhere by tonight. My phone was already buzzing with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, email alerts, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I glimpsed a few preview lines, Channel 6 News seeking comment. Philadelphia Inquirer investigation. Statement regarding Delacroix properties. Tony looked equally shell-shocked. Ma'am, does this mean our names are going to be in the papers? Mr. Ricci, you just exposed what could be the largest rental fraud scheme in the city's history. Yes, your name will absolutely be in the papers. Judge Hernandez signed another document with sharp, decisive strokes. Both of you need to understand, this case just became much bigger than a simple eviction dispute. My phone rang, the shrill tone echoing off the courtroom walls. The caller ID showed WPHL Channel 17. I declined the call, but it immediately started ringing again from a different news outlet. Don't answer those, Judge Hernandez warned. Not until you've spoken with the prosecutors and decided how you want to handle media attention. Media attention. The phrase made my stomach churn. I was a graduate student who just wanted working heat and a cockroach-free kitchen. Now I was apparently the face of a major housing scandal that could destroy one of the city's biggest landlords. Your Honor, Tony said hesitantly, what happens to my job? I mean, Mr. Delacroix is in jail, but Delacroix Properties still exists, right? They got other managers, other maintenance contracts. The reality of Tony's situation hit me like a freight train. He'd just burned his career to the ground to save me. A maintenance worker with 3 kids had risked everything to expose his corrupt boss, and I'd been so focused on my own victory that I hadn't fully grasped his sacrifice. Mr. Ricci, Judge Hernandez said carefully, Delacroix Properties will likely be frozen pending investigation. But even if it weren't, you'd never be safe working there again. The witness protection I mentioned isn't just about physical safety, it includes employment assistance and relocation if necessary. Relocation. Tony might have to uproot his entire family because he'd done the right thing. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from my roommate Jessica. Riley, there are reporters outside our building asking about you. What the hell happened in court today? Reporters at my apartment. My private life was about to become very public, very quickly. Ms. Chen, Judge Hernandez said, noticing my growing panic, I know this feels overwhelming. But you need to understand what you've accomplished here. Those 8 other victims Tony mentioned. They're going to get justice because of your courage today. 8 other people. 8 other graduate students or young professionals who've been systematically defrauded and possibly forced out of their homes. The number made this whole situation feel impossibly large. Detective Morrison will contact you within 24 hours, the judge continued. Until then, don't speak to reporters, don't go anywhere alone, and document any attempts at contact or intimidation. As we gathered our belongings to leave, Tony turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Ms. Chen, he said quietly, I got something else you need to know. About the other properties, the other victims. Some of them, they weren't as lucky as you. Tony's words hit me like ice water. What do you mean they weren't as lucky? He glanced around the nearly empty courtroom, then leaned closer. 3 of them dropped out of school. Just disappeared. One girl, Amanda Rodriguez, she was a PhD candidate in chemistry. Delacroix hit her with a $4,500 damage claim right before her dissertation defense. She couldn't afford a lawyer, couldn't prove the damage was fake, and her stipend got garnished. My stomach dropped. What happened to her? Last I heard, she was working at a Starbucks in South Jersey. 6 years of graduate work down the drain. Tony's voice cracked. And there was this kid, Michael Chen, no relation to you, pre-med student. Delacroix claimed he'd caused $3,800 in water damage from an overflowing bathtub. But I knew that bathroom had leaked for months before the kid even moved in. Judge Hernandez was still at the bench, but she was clearly listening. The weight of these revelations settled over the courtroom like smoke. Michael couldn't handle the stress of the lawsuit while studying for his MCATs, Tony continued. Had some kind of breakdown. His parents had to pull him out of school and take him back to California. That was 2 years ago. 2 years. While I'd been settling into graduate school, other students were having their lives systematically destroyed by the same man who'd just been led away in handcuffs. How many others, Tony? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He flipped through his battered notebook. In my records. 11 students over the past 3 years who got hit with major damage claims right before big exams or thesis defenses. It was like Delacroix had their academic calendars memorized. Jesus, I whispered. The pattern was sickeningly clear now. Marcus hadn't just been running a random fraud scheme, he'd been strategically targeting students at their most vulnerable moments, when they couldn't afford distractions or legal battles. My phone buzzed with yet another unknown number, but this time I recognized the area code. Boston. That was where my parents lived. The text message made my blood run cold. Riley, reporters called our house asking about your housing lawsuit. What's going on? Call immediately. Mom. Reporters had found my parents. My personal information was apparently already spreading through news networks faster than I could process what was happening in this courtroom. Your Honor, I said, my voice shaking, the media found my family's contact information. How is that even possible? Judge Hernandez frowned. Property records are public, Ms. Chen. Your lease application likely listed emergency contacts. Once reporters have your name, they can piece together quite a lot very quickly. Another text popped up, this one from my advisor Dr. Patterson. Riley, I just got a call from the university's legal department. They want to meet with both of us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Bring everything. The university's legal department. Of course they'd want to get involved. If one of their graduate students had just exposed a massive fraud scheme involving student housing, they'd need to cover their own liability. Tony, I said suddenly, did any of the victims try to fight back? File complaints, contact lawyers. His expression darkened. A couple tried. But Delacroix had connections, you know. City inspectors who owed him favors, judges who'd heard his sob stories about destructive tenants for years. Plus, he'd always settle just before court for slightly less than the legal fees would cost. What do you mean, settle? Say he sued someone for $4,000. Right before their court date, his lawyer would call and offer to settle for $2,500. Most broke students would take it rather than risk losing the full amount plus court costs. Tony shook his head disgustedly. It was genius, really. Evil, but genius. I thought about my own case. If Tony hadn't shown up today, if those recordings hadn't existed, I might have been facing that exact choice in a few hours. Pay Marcus $2,500 I didn't have, or risk losing $3,000 I definitely didn't have. Ms. Chen, Judge Hernandez called, Detective Morrison just texted. He's downstairs and would like to speak with both of you before you leave the building. Before I could respond, the courtroom doors burst open again. This time it wasn't Tony arriving to save the day. It was Marcus Delacroix's wife, and she looked absolutely furious. Mrs. Delacroix, Judge Hernandez said sharply as the woman strode into the courtroom like she owned it, this is highly irregular. Court has been adjourned. Catherine Delacroix looked like money and power wrapped in a $3,000 designer coat. Her silver hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and her diamond earrings caught the fluorescent light as she moved. But her composed exterior couldn't hide the fury blazing in her eyes. Your Honor, I need to speak on behalf of my husband. This entire proceeding is based on fabricated evidence, Anne. Ma'am, the bailiff stepped forward, you need to leave immediately or you'll be held in contempt. But Catherine wasn't backing down. Her gaze swept across the courtroom until it landed on me, and I felt like I'd been hit with a laser beam of pure hatred. You, she said, pointing a manicured finger in my direction. You little opportunist. Do you have any idea what you've just done to my family? My mouth went dry. Tony stepped slightly in front of me, his shoulders squared protectively. Mrs. Delacroix, Judge Hernandez's voice boomed, you will address the court, not the witnesses. Fine. Catherine turned back to the bench, her voice dripping with the kind of entitlement that came from decades of never hearing the word, no, Your Honor, my husband owns 47 properties in this city. He employs 36 people directly and supports dozens of contractors and vendors. This witch hunt will destroy not just our family, but the livelihoods of everyone who depends on Delacroix properties. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to paint Marcus as some kind of civic hero instead of a systematic fraudster who destroyed students' lives for profit. Furthermore, she continued, this girl clearly orchestrated this entire situation. Recording private conversations, colluding with disgruntled employees. Disgruntled? Tony's voice cracked like a whip. Lady, I worked for your husband for 8 years. I was loyal until he asked me to break the law. Catherine's eyes narrowed as she focused on Tony. Mr. Ricci, isn't it true that you've been stealing tools and supplies from company properties? That Marcus was planning to terminate your employment for theft. My heart sank. Was she about to flip the script on Tony? Turn him from hero whistleblower into vindictive criminal? But Tony just laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the courtroom walls. Ma'am, if your husband told you I was stealing, he was setting up his backup plan. Same way he always does. What backup plan? Judge Hernandez asked. Tony pulled out his phone and started scrolling through what looked like dozens of text messages. Mrs. Delacroix, did your husband tell you he's been documenting fake thefts by employees for the past year? Creating paper trails to discredit anyone who might testify against him? He held up his phone, showing a text thread. This is from last month. Marcus asking me to sign fake incident reports claiming I saw other maintenance workers stealing supplies. He said it was just paperwork and standard procedure. Catherine's composure cracked for just a moment, uncertainty flickering across her features. But she recovered quickly. Your Honor, this man clearly has an agenda. He's been planning this betrayal for months, gathering so-called evidence to destroy a family business built over 22 years. A family business built on fraud, I said quietly, finally finding my voice. Mrs. Delacroix, your husband systematically targeted graduate students. He destroyed people's academic careers for money. Catherine whirled on me, her mask of civility completely gone now. You self-righteous little brat. Do you know what it costs to maintain 47 properties? The insurance, the taxes, the constant repairs. Students like you treat our apartments like garbage and then cry victim when there are consequences. The consequences for reporting broken heat and black mold. I shot back. The consequences for asking for basic habitability. The consequences for biting the hand that feeds you, Catherine snarled. Marcus gave you people affordable housing near campus, and this is how you repay him. By destroying his reputation and putting his employees out of work. Judge Hernandez had heard enough. Mrs. Delacroix, your husband was arrested for perjury and fraud based on recorded confessions and documentary evidence. This isn't a matter of opinion or interpretation. But Catherine wasn't finished. She reached into her purse and pulled out what looked like legal documents. Your Honor, I'm filing an emergency motion to freeze all assets related to this case. If Delacroix Properties goes under, 11 families will lose their primary income overnight. I'm also requesting immediate injunctions against any media coverage that could prejudice potential jurors. My phone buzzed with an urgent text from Detective Morrison, don't leave the building. We have a situation. What kind of situation required me to stay in the courthouse? As if summoned by my thoughts, Detective Morrison burst through the courtroom doors, his badge prominently displayed and his expression grim. Your Honor, we need to evacuate this floor immediately. We just received a credible threat against the witnesses in this case. The word threat hit the courtroom like a physical force. Detective Morrison's hand was already moving toward his radio as Judge Hernandez shot to her feet. What kind of threat, Detective? She demanded. Anonymous called to the tip line 15 minutes ago. Male voice claimed there would be consequences for anyone who testified against Marcus Delacroix. Specifically mentioned Ms. Chen and Mr. Ricci by name. My legs went weak. Catherine Delacroix's face had gone pale, but I couldn't tell if it was from shock or guilt. Tony grabbed my arm to steady me as the bailiff moved toward the courtroom doors. Mrs. Delacroix, Detective Morrison continued, his voice sharp, I need you to stay exactly where you are. We're going to have questions about your husband's associates and business partners. This is insane, Catherine protested, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Marcus doesn't associate with violent people. He's a businessman, not some street thug. Ma'am, your husband's business involved systematic fraud targeting vulnerable students. That kind of operation requires a certain type of person willing to bend rules. Morrison's radio crackled with static-filled voices. We're also investigating whether Mr. Delacroix had helped intimidating previous victims who tried to fight back. Previous victims. My mind flashed to Tony's list, 11 students over 3 years, most of whom had simply disappeared from their programs. Had they all left voluntarily, or had some been scared away? Your Honor, Morrison said, we need to move Ms. Chen and Mr. Ricci to a secure location until we can assess the credibility of this threat. Judge Hernandez was already gathering her files. Bailiff, clear the gallery. Mrs. Delacroix, you're coming with us for questioning. I absolutely will not, Catherine began. Actually, you will, Morrison interrupted. The call came from a burner phone registered to an address 3 blocks from your home in Chestnut Hill. We have some very specific questions about your family's communication patterns today. The implication hung heavy in the air. Had Catherine or someone in her circle made that threatening call? My phone was buzzing constantly now, reporters, unknown numbers, even my college roommate from 2 years ago who'd somehow heard the news. Tony looked like he was about to be sick. Detective, my kids are at school right now. Roosevelt Elementary on Broad Street. If someone's making threats. Already handled, Morrison replied. We have officers stationed at the school and at your home address. Your wife Martha is being briefed as we speak. The efficiency was both reassuring and terrifying. In the span of 30 minutes, I'd gone from eviction defendant to protected witness in what was apparently a major criminal investigation. My quiet graduate student life had been obliterated completely. Ms. Chen, Morrison turned to me, we intercepted 3 more calls to various news outlets claiming to have inside information about your background. Someone's running a coordinated campaign to discredit you before this story breaks wide. Catherine's face flushed red. How dare you imply that I would? Mrs. Delacroix, your husband's business partner Vincent Carlucci has been arrested twice for witness intimidation in unrelated cases. Your company's security contractor, Jimmy Morrison, no relation, has known connections to organized crime figures in South Jersey. So forgive me if I don't immediately assume this is just some random crank call. Vincent Carlucci. Jimmy Morrison. Names I'd never heard before, but apparently Marcus's business network included some genuinely dangerous people. The scope of what I'd stumbled into kept expanding beyond anything I could have imagined. Judge Hernandez was packing her briefcase with sharp, efficient movements. Detective Morrison, I'm issuing emergency protective orders for both witnesses. Full court security until further notice. My phone rang, Dr. Patterson, my advisor. I declined the call, but immediately got a text, Riley, there are men in suits asking questions about you at the department. Don't come to campus alone. The tentacles of this investigation were spreading everywhere, touching every part of my life. In trying to save my apartment, I'd apparently declared war on an entire criminal organization. And the war was just getting started. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a windowless conference room at the federal building, surrounded by more law enforcement than I'd ever seen in one place. Detective Morrison had been joined by FBI agent Sarah Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, a prosecutor from the district attorney's office, and someone from the U.S. attorney's office whose business card simply read, Financial Crimes Division. My phone had been confiscated, for security purposes, leaving me completely cut off from the outside world while agents traced the threatening calls. Tony sat across from me, his weathered hands clasped tightly together, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. Ms. Chen, Agent Chen said, sliding a thick folder across the table, we need you to look at these photographs and tell us if you recognize any of these individuals. The first photo made my blood run cold. It was me, taken 3 days ago outside the campus library, completely unaware I was being photographed. The second showed me entering my apartment building. The third captured me having coffee with Jessica at our usual spot on Walnut Street. Someone's been following me, I whispered, my voice barely audible. For at least a week, Agent Chen confirmed. These were found on Vincent Carlucci's phone when we executed the search warrant 2 hours ago. Vincent Carlucci, Marcus's business partner. The man Detective Morrison had mentioned in the courtroom. I flipped through more photos, seeing my daily routine documented with terrifying precision. Coffee at 8:15 a.m. Library until 2 p.m. Grocery shopping on Thursdays at the Whole Foods on South Street. Why would Marcus's business partner be stalking me? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named District Attorney Rebecca Torres, leaned forward. Because you weren't supposed to win today, Ms. Chen. Our investigation suggests that Delacroix Properties has been running this fraud scheme for over 5 years, targeting more than 40 students. You're the first one who fought back successfully. 40 students. The number hit me like a physical blow. Tony's notebook had only covered 3 years, this went back even further. Vincent Carlucci specializes in what he calls problem resolution, Agent Chen continued. Students who wouldn't accept settlement offers, who insisted on going to court, who contacted legal aid organizations, they tend to have unfortunate experiences. Break-ins where only computers and phones are stolen. Cars vandalized right before court dates. Family members receiving disturbing calls. My throat felt like sandpaper. You're saying they've been terrorizing students into silence. We're saying that's exactly what they've been doing, D.A. Torres replied. The threat called in today. That was panic. Your recordings and Tony's testimony just exposed a multi-million-dollar operation that's been running under the radar for years. Tony finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Ms. Chen, I need to tell you something else. About why I really came to court today. Everyone turned to look at him. Agent Chen reached for her recording device. Yesterday morning, Vincent Carlucci came to my apartment. Said he'd heard I might be confused about what I'd seen in your unit. Offered me $5,000 to stick to the original damage report. You didn't mention this earlier, Detective Morrison said sharply. Because I was scared, Tony admitted. But when he left, he said something that made my blood run cold. He said, it would be terrible if something happened to that Chen girl before she learned to keep her mouth shut. Graduate students have such dangerous lives, so much stress, so many accidents waiting to happen. The conference room fell silent. Agent Chen was typing furiously on her laptop, probably running traces on Carlucci's recent communications. Tony, I said quietly, is that why you came to court? To protect me? He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I got 3 daughters, Ms. Chen. If someone threatened one of them, I'd want another father to step up and do the right thing. D.A. Torres was already reaching for her phone. Agent Chen, we need Carlucci in custody within the hour. And I want protective details on both witnesses upgraded immediately. As if on cue, Detective Morrison's radio crackled to life, Unit 47 to Detective Morrison. We have eyes on the Chen residence. Black sedan, Pennsylvania plates, 2 male occupants conducting surveillance. Requesting instructions. My apartment was being watched. Right now. Agent Chen was on her feet before Detective Morrison's radio went silent. How long have they been there? Unknown. Unit just arrived for routine patrol and spotted them immediately. Vehicle's been there long enough that the engine's cold. My stomach dropped. Someone had been watching my apartment for hours, maybe since I'd left for court this morning. Jessica was probably inside, completely unaware that dangerous men were monitoring our building. We need to get my roommate out of there, I said, standing so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. Already in motion, Detective Morrison replied, speaking rapidly into his radio. Unit 23, execute wellness check on Jessica Martinez, apartment 4A. Full tactical support. D.A. Torres was pacing now, her phone pressed to her ear. I caught fragments of her conversation, federal charges, interstate fraud, witness intimidation. This was spiraling far beyond anything resembling a normal housing dispute. Agent Chen pulled up surveillance footage on her laptop. Ms. Chen, can you identify this vehicle? She turned the screen toward me, showing grainy black and white footage of a sedan parked across from my building. I squinted at the image. I've never seen that car before. But something nagged at me about the angle, the positioning. That's the perfect spot to see everyone coming and going from the main entrance. Professional surveillance, Agent Chen confirmed grimly. These aren't random thugs. Someone with experience chose that location. Tony leaned over to study the footage. Wait. Ms. Chen, look at the timestamp. That car's been there since 6:23 a.m. You left for court when, around 8:30. The timeline made my skin crawl. They'd been in position before I'd even woken up, watching and waiting. But waiting for what? Detective Morrison's radio crackled again, Unit 23 reporting. Female occupant Jessica Martinez secured and relocated. Apartment appears undisturbed. Black sedan fled when our units approached, northbound on 42nd Street, speeds exceeding posted limits. Relief flooded through me, immediately followed by a new wave of terror. Jessica was safe, but now the people watching my apartment knew the police were involved. They'd escalate. Agent Chen, D.A. Torres said, ending her call, we just got word from the Federal Monitoring Station. Vincent Carlucci made 17 phone calls in the past hour. Burner phones, encrypted communications, the works. He's coordinating something big. What kind of something? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The kind that requires witness relocation, Agent Chen replied, her expression grim. Ms. Chen, I need you to understand what we're dealing with here. Delacroix Properties generated approximately $2.8 million in fraudulent damage claims over the past 5 years. That money didn't disappear, it funded other operations, property acquisitions, political contributions. Political contributions. The scope kept expanding in directions I couldn't have imagined. Furthermore, she continued, we've traced shell companies, offshore accounts, and what appears to be a sophisticated money laundering operation using student housing as the front. Your eviction case just exposed what the FBI has been investigating for 18 months. 18 months. The federal government had been building a case against Marcus, and I'd accidentally provided the final piece of evidence they needed. My hands were shaking as the full weight of my situation settled in. Agent Chen, when you say witness relocation. I mean new identity, new city, new life, she said bluntly. At least until the trials are over and the major players are in federal prison. Tony's face went ashen. What about my kids? My wife? We can't just disappear. Mr. Ricci, Vincent Carlucci's phone records show calls to 3 different private investigators in the past week. They have your children's school schedules, your wife's work address, even your mother's nursing home information. The room felt like it was spinning. In trying to save my graduate program, I'd inadvertently destroyed not just my own life, but Tony's entire family's safety. Agent Chen's phone buzzed urgently. She glanced at it and went pale. We have a problem. Agent Chen's face went from pale to ashen as she read her phone. Vincent Carlucci just posted bail. He's been released. The words hit the room like a physical force. Tony made a strangled sound, and I felt the blood drain from my face. How is that even possible? D.A. Torres demanded, grabbing her own phone. We arrested him 3 hours ago on federal charges. High-powered legal team, character witnesses, and a $500,000 cash bond, Agent Chen replied grimly. His lawyers argued he was a pillar of the community with no flight risk. Detective Morrison was already coordinating on his radio, but I could tell from his expression that we were behind the curve. Carlucci was out, and he knew exactly where to find Tony's family and me. Agent Chen, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I need to know something. When Marcus walked into court this morning, was he expecting to lose? She looked up from her phone, confused by the question. What do you mean? He was too confident. Too prepared with fake evidence. But if you've been investigating this for 18 months, if there are 40 victims, if there's a whole criminal network. I was thinking out loud, pieces clicking together. Marcus didn't just randomly decide to frame me. This was planned specifically to discredit the one witness who could expose everything. Tony was nodding slowly. She's right. Marcus knew about your recordings somehow. He knew you documented everything. That's why he went nuclear with the fake damage claims. Agent Chen's expression shifted as she processed this. You're suggesting this eviction was a preemptive strike. I'm suggesting someone told him I was dangerous to their operation. I pulled out the business card I'd been carrying since yesterday. Agent Chen, what can you tell me about Sarah Kim from the Legal Aid Society? The room went dead silent. How do you know that name? Agent Chen asked, her voice sharp. She texted me during court today. Said she'd seen the news and wanted to talk. I showed them my phone. But there wasn't any news coverage when she sent this. The reporters were still in the courtroom. Detective Morrison grabbed my phone and studied the message timestamp. This was sent at 10:47 a.m. The arrests weren't announced until 11:30. D.A. Torres was already typing on her laptop. Sarah Kim, Legal Aid Society. Let me run her background. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, then stopped abruptly. Oh, shit. What? Tony and I asked simultaneously. There is no Sarah Kim at the Legal Aid Society. There never has been. But there is a Sarah Kim who works as a private investigator for. She paused, checking her screen. Vincent Carlucci Consulting Services. My blood turned to ice. The woman who'd contacted me claiming to want to help was one of Carlucci's investigators. They'd been playing me from the beginning. Agent Chen, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, if they knew about my recordings, if they planned this whole thing, then they have contingency plans we haven't discovered yet, she finished grimly. As if summoned by our conversation, Agent Chen's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went white. It's Marcus Delacroix. He's calling from jail. She put the call on speaker, and Marcus's voice filled the conference room, but gone was the arrogant confidence from this morning. He sounded terrified. Agent Chen. This is Marcus Delacroix. I need to make a deal. Right now. Mr. Delacroix, you should be speaking through your lawyer. My lawyer just fired me. Marcus's voice cracked with panic. Vincent's people got to him. They threatened his family. Agent Chen, you have to listen to me. Riley Chen and Tony Ricci are in immediate danger. Vincent didn't just post bail to run. He posted bail to clean house. Tony grabbed my hand across the table. Agent Chen was frantically signaling to Detective Morrison. What kind of danger, Mr. Delacroix? Vincent has a cleanup protocol. When an operation gets exposed, he eliminates the witnesses and disappears the evidence. He's done it twice before in Atlantic City and once in Camden. Marcus's voice was shaking now. Agent Chen, I never signed up for violence. I thought this was just financial fraud. But Vincent. Vincent kills people. The room erupted in coordinated chaos. Detective Morrison was barking orders into his radio while DA Torres called for immediate federal marshals. Agent Chen kept Marcus on the line, extracting every detail about Carlucci's methods and timeline. But through the noise and panic, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Agent Chen, I interrupted, my voice cutting through the chaos. Where exactly is Jessica right now? You said she was relocated, but where? Detective Morrison stopped mid-sentence. Agent Chen's face went pale. Unit 23, Morrison called into his radio. Status report on Jessica Martinez. Static filled the air. Then, Detective Morrison, we have a problem. The safe house address was compromised. Unit 23 is not responding. Vincent Carlucci hadn't just posted bail to eliminate Tony and me. He'd posted bail to use Jessica as leverage. And we'd walked right into his trap.